Ready?
Yes.
Okay, before we get started, we'll go to Miguel for our opening statement in Spanish.
Muy buenas noches. Si hay alguna persona en el público que necesita servicio de interpretación, se puede presentar a la cabina donde está el caballero y para recoger un dispositivo parecido a aquel que llevo en la mano derecha con auricular para poder escuchar en el idioma de su gusto. Gracias. If at any time some language other than Spanish is being used and somebody would like to listen or partake, you can come over to the booth over here in order to be able to get a device like the one I'm holding in my right hand, and we will preset it to the destination language of your choice. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Good evening. My name is Candace Perry, and I am the Director of the Office of Environmental Justice at New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection. Thank you so much for being here with us. I am delighted to be sitting here with Sean LaTourette, Commissioner of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection, and Lisa Garcia, Regional Administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Region 2 Office, which covers New Jersey. We are gathered here to speak with all of you to talk about environmental justice here in Passaic County. Unfortunately, there are some communities, because of their race, income, and limited English proficiency, that experience more environmental burdens like air and water pollution, flooding, and extreme heat than others. Those same communities also tend to have less environmental benefits like green space and trees that cool and clean the air and soak up stormwater runoff. In Passaic County, there is a mixture of densely compacted urban areas and less dense, more rural areas where minority and low-income communities are contending with a number of environmental justice issues, like contaminated sites due to the legacy of industry in the region, lack of adequate greenery and open space to beat the heat, water quality issues, and so on. And all of this is being made worse by more frequent and intense rain events as our climate gets warmer, as indicated by Hurricane Ida and the heat wave that we are currently experiencing. This is why it is so important for government to hear directly from those most impacted so that we can be informed of your lived experiences and use that feedback to color the work that we do every day. Before the pandemic, we were honored to be welcomed into Patterson City for an environmental justice session. And so we're excited for this full circle moment to be returning to Passaic County, this time here in Passaic City, almost 2.5 years later. So we're so appreciative of the warm welcome and the hospitality. So far, we've made stops in Burlington City and Burlington County, Elizabeth and Union County, South Toms River and Ocean County, Phillipsburg and the Highlands, and we plan to make more stops on our tour before the year's end. So I'll briefly run through our agenda for today, which is very simple. Soon I'll pass it over to my panelists to get us started with some remarks, and then we'll open the floor to all of you in the room and those of you online to raise your comments or questions. Before I pass it over to my two colleagues, just want to give a few quick shout outs and thank yous. First, we are delighted to be here at the Boys and Girls Club of Passaic, so thank you so much for hosting us. And I also want to give a special thanks to Assemblyman Gary Scher and the staff within your office who helped to make this event possible. Thank you so much. Assemblyman, would you like to say a few words of welcome? Welcome, thank you. Also to Mayor Laura, thank you for your hospitality and showing us around the city earlier today. Would you like to say a word of welcome? Okay, ditto, is great. All right, I also want to recognize if there's any other county or municipal elected or appointed officials in the room, just to say a wave, maybe you can share your name and your title. Thank you. Just wanted to acknowledge your presence. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. If there are any appointed or elected officials online, please feel free to introduce yourself and your office in the chat, and just want to say hello to you. So now I will pass it over to New Jersey's Environment Commissioner, Sean Monterey.
You needn't clap for me, but thank you. And thank you again to the Assemblyman and Mayor and all of your colleagues, to the Boys and Girls Club, Wendy in particular, for the gracious hospitality and support in opening up this space to us. But more importantly, how you open up this space, maintain and care for it for your fellow residents. So I needn't repeat what Candace had shared, the sad reality that despite the fact that we all together create pollution within our environment as a function of how we live our daily lives and run our businesses, but that not all of us experience that pollution or the negative environmental externalities that our state experiences. We do not experience those conditions equally. It is unfortunately the case even now in 2022 that some communities bear a disproportionate burden of the pollution or the flooding or the heat that we all together create. But that also puts us in a position of power to make change. And to my mind, there's only one way that you really do that. And it's not by pretending that folks in a state or a national capital, for that matter, have all the answers, but that we have to engage deeply with the people that we wish to serve and hear from them, right? Not engagement for the sake of engagement, but engagement for the purpose of action. And so, Mayor, thank you for showing us some of the challenges this afternoon that your city faces and that you are so trying to fix for the betterment of the people you serve. And you have our partnership in that, and we will return to the issues of flooding and better site security for pollution generating facilities and putting ourselves in a position to respond more expeditiously to threats, be they from fires at chemical facilities or air pollution control issues, nuisance or otherwise, right? Because we can all do better together. We can lift up our communities by better enforcing our laws and showing people that their government hears them and will act. So thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you to my partner on the federal side, Regional Administrator Lisa Garcia, joining us on multiple stops of this tour. Please share with us.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I also want to do a round of thanks, obviously, to Passaic City, Mayor, Assemblyman. It's really wonderful to be here. Oh, and to the Boys and Girls Club. It's so beautiful in here, and the colors are great. So as the Commissioner mentioned, my name is Lisa Garcia, Regional Administrator for Region 2 of the Environmental Protection Agency. Region 2 covers New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and 8 Indian nations. And so it's great to be able to, as the Commissioner said, partner on these issues. Many of you may have heard or know that President Biden on day one signed an executive order saying that climate and environmental justice are going to be #1 issues. And one of the reasons that I thought I would take this wonderful opportunity to join the administration is because of that priority on environmental justice and racial equity. It's part of my background, my career. And so it's just really wonderful to be able to implement these priorities. But of course, also, as the Commissioner said, #1 priority is to go out and to talk to communities, to meet with people, to understand what the challenges are and what the potential solutions are. And we can only do that together by being here on the ground with communities our state partners, our local partners, and of course, other federal agencies. So that's why we're here. And I really want to thank New Jersey DEP, the commissioner, and all the staff for inviting us along on these environmental justice tours and being able to meet with communities so that we can collectively figure out what those true solutions are. And I'll just quickly mention, along the side of solutions, one of the exciting pieces that the federal government now has is under the bipartisan infrastructure law. EPA got $60 billion to use over the next 5 years. And some of it is going to New Jersey. And so really being able to partner on cleaning up contaminated sites, on thinking about water infrastructure to deal with climate events, changing out lead service lines. So there's a host of issues that we already are thinking about how to utilize this funding to get to the communities that really need it the most. And so it's just wonderful to be here. And I'll just say thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so before we dive into the discussion, just want to go over some housekeeping notes really quick. So each person will have 3 minutes to speak and share your comment. So if you're comfortable, please state your name and where you live in Passaic County, just to give some context for where you live. If you're able, I'll ask you to form a line to my left, your right, to take your comment or your question. And for those of you who are online, we do see you, we're monitoring you. Feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you to unmute yourself to ask your question, and or feel free to put your comment or question in the chat and we can read it out loud that way.
Also for the people online, si hablan español, podemos oírte, puedes, como Candace dijo, puedes significar o notificarnos que quieres hablar y podemos traducir. Así que no tengan miedo, queremos hablar con ustedes también. Thanks. Oh, okay, great. So, oh, okay. Yeah, y tenemos un traductor también que nos está ayudando.
Great. All right, so with that, I will invite the first person to make your way to the mic. And if you're physically unable, we can bring the mic to you.
Being first is always hard, and that's okay. But Wendy, she's not shy.
Wendy.
Yes. Yeah, but if you use the mic, that will help to make sure that the folks who are online also hear.
So if I'm first, somebody's got to be second. So start thinking about that. Good evening. My name is Wendy Mcguire. I'm the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Patterson and Passaic. So glad you're here. So glad everybody gets to see the inside of this building and you're reacting the way our kids do every day, because they deserve a place vibrant, dynamic, and ready to learn. So my question is actually about that, because that's my lens, right? We have to do the things externally, just like I got to manage the facilities here, right? But getting the minds of the kids to change actually creates the next version of the 3 panelists, right? We want them to understand what it is. I think when we first met, I said, what is environmental justice? I'd never heard those 2 words put together. And I've since spread that to so many people, because I was like, well, of course, that's what we need to do. So my question is about education, specifically youth education, simply because that's where my mind is at. And it's a question and then an offer of partnership, right? Our kids need to know what you all are talking about, what we're all talking about. So it would be great to extend a hand and say, what can we bring here to the club? How are you looking at education overall inside of those billions of dollars?
That's a great question. I bet you would get 3 different answers from the folks up here. One of the things that I worry about when we're doing the work of government agencies, because that's what we are, right? We are at the Department of Environmental Protection in charge of making sure that the air is clean, the water is clean, that folks are better protected from flooding and have access to green and open spaces. And sometimes I worry that the way that we talk about these issues, it can sometimes feel like we're just talking to ourselves. And in order to help bridge the divide between what government is supposed to do by the terms of our charge in protecting air or water, and what government can do in terms of really engaging its citizenry and its youth in particular. So one of the ways that we've approached youth education is to invite young people in to our agency to both learn and work through an initiative that we started last year called the Youth Inclusion Initiative. And we partner with local nonprofit or community-based organizations. This year, it's Groundwork out of Elizabeth, Ironbound Community Corporation out of Newark, and Rutgers Camden. And we put together a cohort of young people and we bring them into DEP, and we put together a whole agenda of teaching young people about the environment, how you protect it, and the employment opportunities that await. Because at the same time that we're trying to spread education, we're also selfishly motivated. Your environment is hiring, right? We have lots of jobs to offer. And if we don't create the awareness, if we don't build upon the interest of young people in the environmental fields, well, then we might only ever be talking to ourselves. So that is one way that we look at education. And then the other is we have an Office of Environmental Education that engages with schools primarily. But I hear you that might not be the highest and only, or at least not the only place to seat that engagement. Lisa?
Oh, so first of all, I'll add, as a Latina, I like to show up and make sure people see Latinas do justicia ambiental and are out there doing the work. So one is I offer up and volunteer to speak, to go to classrooms, to get out there. Just, you know, for me as being able to be a mentor, especially getting into classrooms and really talking to kids when they're younger. For the EPA on the more professional side, we don't necessarily have high school programs. But we're partnering actually with the youth initiative that the commissioner is talking about, and bringing them to our lab in Edison, New Jersey to showcase the type of work that's going on. And so that'll be really fun. And then we do have, you know, internships and fellowships, and we have a new pathways program. And so really trying to create that pipeline of like, if you come in as an intern, how do we build the next generation of environmentalists or lawyers who are doing environmental work, or PhDs who are doing environmental work. So it really, it's both showing up and making sure people understand you can join us, and also those specific programs. But we can give you more information about programs that do this type of work. Yeah.
And Candace?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the awareness piece that was a part of your question, that like maybe many people don't know the term environmental justice, that they're experiencing the injustices, but they don't have the language for it. They don't have the terminology and the jargon for it. So something that my office is going to be working on is some educational and training type modules and opportunities for communities to really help build up the community capacity that so many overburdened communities come to us, to my office, to say is that I have this issue or that issue, but I just don't have the capacity to deal with it, or I don't have the capacity to engage my neighbors or to engage my residents, to mobilize around solution making and problem solving. And so that's something that state government can fulfill and help with, is really increasing that capacity. And the way to do that is to increase awareness. And so educational materials is something that we're going to be developing, and would love to have a youth component to that, and would love to maybe talk offline about partnering.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So again, I'm Bruce James. I'm the director of the Board of County Commissioners in Passaic County. I also sit on the Highlands Council, so I'm very aware of the power and the reach of the DEP.
Mhm.
Thankfully. I mean, I see the work you've done. I've been on it now for over 10 years. So, you know, I got to work with a whole bunch of people in Chester who work for you guys. So today was important to me because we spend a lot of money on open space on parks. As you know, I mean, that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on. But one of the things that I think we don't look at enough is what's the impact. We have food deserts throughout Passaic County and our cities. You know, rules that you make for DEP, when we want to do something, we have to get your approval. Why aren't you making those rules stronger so that we have to use some of that money and exactly the kinds of things that you're talking about? Because I'm on board for that. And I think my colleagues would be on board for that. And I think that we reallocate. It's not I'm saying give up on our parks, but you know, we have a responsibility to budget that in a capital way every year. It shouldn't just all be out of open space money, right? So, you know, I was listening to the mayor today, especially when he was describing everything, and I've walked that with him before. So he's sort of an expert on what not to do and what to leave alone, because that's the consequences that we see. So what I'm asking really is partner with us in a way where we can't ignore it. We should be in a position where, yes, this is exactly where we want to be. We want to help you do it. You're not going to get all the money from the state, but we have local money, right? We fund City Green. They make community gardens everywhere, but is it coordinated the way that it should be coordinated? I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that I think if we work together, maybe have a select committee of just maybe 3 or 4 people, not a lot, to make sure that it doesn't get overwhelmed in, you know, bodies having an opinion. But let's start doing exactly what you said. Instead of talking and not walking the walk, let's walk the walk together. And I'm willing to work with you and make sure that gets done.
I so very much appreciate that. Whether we're talking about the ways that we need to adapt our Green Acres rules and requirements in the ways that we were talking about in touring the park where there had been flood damage, just to give folks perspective, but also in how we administer the program top to bottom. What expectations are we creating, and not just what expectations, but what requirements and deliverables upon those receiving funding so that it's really used in the way that we intend, right? And there can be reluctance on the part of state government to be heavy-handed with local government. That does happen. But the way that we can approach that, as you suggest, in an effort of partnership, one idea strikes me off the top of my head. We are in the process of launching an initiative that we call Outside Together. And it is the development of the state's comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. And it includes within it an analysis of what our challenges are in terms of open space and recreational accessibility, what our opportunities are. How can we both create open space, create recreational opportunity, and fight flooding? Because you can do all those things together. And how do we then need to change the rules and the systems in order to make those things happen? So what I will do is have the head of our Outside Together initiative reach out to you, because there are advisory groups forming for the very purpose that you articulated in order to build that partnership. You're welcome.
I think we have a few questions coming in online, so I'll pose one. It says the new state budget includes $300 million for water infrastructure and $170 million for lead paint remediation. How will this be used?
Consistent with what we're endeavoring to do today by engaging with communities, hearing from folks what their needs are. That is the way that we're approaching the additional $300 million that has been allocated to the Department of Environmental Protection to pursue greater water infrastructure investments. And so we will be holding the week after next a public engagement session where we're soliciting the input from public, from the water sector, from local leadership around ideas for how we can best leverage that 300 million. What might we, what are its limitations? What are the opportunities before us in using those funds? $300 million is a lot of money, but when held up against our water infrastructure challenges as a state, is not a lot of money. We have $30 billion of need in the state of New Jersey for enhancing our water infrastructure. And that $300 million can be used to do a few transformative things or a lot of little things or some combination thereof. And so we're going to share with the public some of our ideas on how we can maximize the reach of those dollars and take feedback on those ideas and others that people have. And so we can share with the attendees today the sign up information to take part in that session. But it doesn't stop at that one session. We'll take written feedback. We'll be speaking about those opportunities at public meetings as part of what we call the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan. And so one place to go, and Candace can drop it in the chat, is to nj.gov/DEP or /WIP, WIIP, for the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan and the engagement opportunities around how we spend those funds. On the lead paint question, sorry, I just realized there's a two-parter. Lead paint remediation is run out of the Department of Community Affairs, but the government is the government is the government. And at least I know when my family looks at their government, they don't see all these departments that we organize ourselves by. They see the government or the governor or the president. And so we'll get you an answer on that question as well.
Lisa, I don't know if you wanted to add anything from your perspective about water infrastructure and the
Yeah, I was just,
opportunities.
I guess I would just say or echo the need for input and for engagement around these issues. I think, for the federal government, especially EPA, New Jersey is a leader on these issues. And so it's really exciting to see where they're going with the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan, the definition of prioritizing vulnerable communities, disadvantaged communities, and really trying to do this outreach to make sure that some of the money goes to the projects that are most needed. And so we're looking forward to continuing to partner with them on it. And so I would just once again encourage folks to really get engaged on the process and especially municipalities to figure out how you can figure out a way to tack onto that money, because it is coming in. So let's take advantage.
Thanks. Cheryl Snyder, I see your hand is up online. So I'll ask you to unmute yourself now, and I think that we should be able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me? No. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay now? Thank you. Cheryl Snyder from Trenton, New Jersey. Candace Perry, thank you for allowing me to be here or giving me the space or the time to talk. Same to you, Sean Latorette. So I just want to say that I missed out on an opportunity to speak when you guys came to a hearing here in Trenton, New Jersey at the DEP. It was the first time walking into the DEP. I didn't know what to expect. You know, you're having an environmental justice hearing. I want to go. I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of people there. People are going to have things to say, but it was not like that. It was quite quiet. But I got to meet some cool people there. But then I felt like I missed the opportunity to tell my story of what's happening here in Trenton, New Jersey. The environmental issues here are big. And I'm here, I'm affected by it. The lead service lines have got to go. Trenton is an old city, especially the East Trenton neighborhood. The homes are laced with lead paint. The pipes coming into the house are either galvanized or they're lead. And what's happening is that the pipes are rusting. And because they're rusting, the water it's leaching lead into the water. So you're ingesting this lead or you're inhaling this lead from the paint that you're breathing in the dust. And we have a lot of children and we have a lot of renters and they're in this old homes. And I've learned so much. Lead is bad business, guys. All right, I know we have it all over this world. Lead is, it's here, but it has no business inside our bodies. Okay, so Trenton needs help. I want you to know we have beautiful families out here. We have beautiful kids out here. And 2018, being personal, the doctors found 2 small blood clots on my lung. Couldn't understand how the heck they got here. I know we did some work on the house where they did some painting and they broke down some walls, and it's an old home. And then, but doctors like, I say my 90-year-old dad staring up, talking to people that wasn't there, me running back and forth to the doctor like I can take care of my dad's body. He's in his 90s all day long, but what's wrong with his mind? And then a friend of mine, he had like kidney stones. All this happened around 2017, and I just didn't think of it. Fast forward, I'm learning so much from Lead Free New Jersey about this lead issue. Hey, I could have been poisoned. We could have all been affected by this lead. But when you go to the doctors, oh, it's masked as something else because no one is checking lead levels. So if environmental justice hearing, Trenton, New Jersey is overburdened with poor housing, blight, crime, dumping, chock full of lead in the soil, lead paint in the homes. And if you can think of this, a pipe, all right? Think of a straw. Our water is good. It's coming from the Delaware. Okay, you're putting these chlorine and everything, but you have to, it has to come through like a dirty straw to get into you. So the water might as well just be dirty as well. But if we have a chance to help the overburdened communities in Trenton, New Jersey, get the lead out, get these pipes changed. And then there's flooding. Oh my goodness. So if we have all this money, I suggest that we focus on getting the lead service lines replaced, helping with the remediation with the lead paint, because that's really big, and the soil. But if we have to do one first, I don't know which one, the paint, the water, or maybe those two first. And this will help Trentonians move forward with their lives and probably have their lives expanded because they don't have to worry about the dangers of lead being in their bodies. Oh, thank you for this time to talk. And that's just my story. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm sorry that you did not have the opportunity to share that at the hearing that was held in Trenton. And I'll tell you that we are working very hard with your city to bring them the resources in partnership with EPA on what we have in New Jersey now, thanks in large part to Assemblyman Scher, who's here today. The lead service line replacement law in the state of New Jersey now requires all lead service lines to be replaced within 10 years. Unfortunately, we do continue to struggle with the city council in Trenton. And I don't believe that that is a surprise. It is known that it has been difficult to get the city council to approve the moving forward of many of these water infrastructure projects, and we will continue to implore them to move forward. The money is there, and we have got your back. So please make an appeal to your city council too, and we will help.
Yeah, and this is Lisa. I'll just add that that one of the ways that we are trying to partner, especially for municipalities that don't have the resources, is part of this new funding for lead service line replacement is going to be is not going to require a match by the municipality, which should help. And some of them are straight out grants. The other piece is there is some money for technical assistance, although it sounds like Trenton may have had the assessment done and the evaluation, but that's one of the reasons that like I said, we're really excited to partner with New Jersey, because everything is in line and we just need to, I guess, unstick some of those barriers to really get the money out and get the work done. But thank you for sharing. And even though you couldn't do it in Trenton, I'm really glad that you found the opportunity to still engage and to talk to us. So thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you. Hector Laura, resident of the city of Passaic, New Jersey. I wanted to quickly just state that statement regarding lead replacement lines. I believe it's one of the most significant legislations that have come from the state, impacting overburdened and underserved communities. And it's already been said that the work and the leadership of Assemblyman Garcia on this, considering the residents and individuals that would be directly impacted, means the world. And fortunately, and I heard the words of some of the challenges, Commissioner, you stated with the Trenton Council. I am proud to say that our city council, led by our council president, who holds an uncanny resemblance to the assemblyman of the 36th legislative district, is alongside with his colleagues and the administration, been more than supportive, and this means the world, which kind of leads into what I wanted to say. You know, the words that were shared by the director of obviously environmental justice, Candace Perry, I think regarding communities that often are ignored, communities that we easily identify as marginalized or vulnerable. And as Ms. Lisa Garcia from the EPA Region 2 mentioned, some who face challenges with language. They don't always have the opportunity to speak up. And those of us in roles of elected office, like Commissioner Bruce James, who shared, we have the opportunity to amplify their voices in platforms that we have and in settings that they may not be able to come to. Considering Passaic, some may be doing 2 jobs right now and would love to be here. And that leads to what I wanted to share, which I have 2 questions, but I wanted to make this statement. I think one of the biggest challenges we face with community when it comes to environmental justice and initiatives is trust. It's trust. Obviously, it goes hand in hand with lack of knowledge, not knowing what's available. And Commissioner Latourette, today when we were at an area where we unfortunately, the city of Passaic, lost lives due to flood issues and storms, multiple lives, and I've had repeated incidents. In the midst of this tour and understanding the time constraints that we had and the need to make sure that everyone has access to this program and ask questions, I interrupted to say there's an area of great concern in Passaic, and I wanted to know if you could see it for yourself. I want those online and those here to know that the commissioner's response, which is a retort that I'm not used to from elected officials, as a mayor, look, we get a lot of people visit the city, was to stop everything and say, let's go right now. It is as if the time didn't matter. What was more important was the impact And I wanted to say that that helps so much, not just for me as an elected official, to trust the approach of the leadership in the state and those leading these most important agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Environmental Protection, obviously environmental justice, because for the layperson, climate resiliency, environmental justice, DEP, EPA, 1,000 acronyms we're used to, they don't know what it means. And as Ms. Garcia, Lisa Garcia shared, especially when you don't speak the language. So one of the questions I want to share as I highlight that, because you blew me away, Commissioner, not just because of the action, but the sincerity and genuine concern in your role that you have to ensure that individuals and communities like ours are receiving equity, that we know that there are monies available and that there's approach and there are leaders that we can actually contact. But again, I want to reiterate, for the layperson, they don't know this. So one of the questions is, if I'm a person in Passaic, not an elected official, I'm not privy to these meetings, I don't know who to go to. I've told my elected officials locally, there's an issue of flooding, there's an issue of contamination, there's a factory or something of concern, and it ends there. See, not with this council, they'll respond right away. We have an assemblyman locally who'll respond right away. But in the case of an individual like that, how do they reach out to these agencies in the state and say, my local municipality isn't responding? It's a concern to me, because sometimes there's already the fear, the reservation of, I don't know if anyone's going to listen to me. I don't know how to explain this in English. And I don't even know, as Candace pointed out, when it comes to equity and when it comes to environmental justice and racial justice and making sure that people who don't have resources, they don't even know if they deserve the response. Do I deserve for individuals to come and help me in the neighborhood? How do they respond? That's one question. The second question I would ask was, and it came out of a conversation I was having with Commissioner Latourette and our assemblyman, one of the approaches or proposals I mentioned, you said that's prioritized in terms of applications. For many of us, as we're trying to come up with solutions, sometimes it's brainstorming. Sometimes we hear the engineers and they give their solution, and sometimes they think in the box, and sometimes some of us think outside of the box, but we don't always know what applications will be prioritized, what approach might streamline the process. Because for us, we have concerns like other municipalities throughout the entire state, over 560, I believe 565, all of them have priorities. But I mentioned there when we were meeting that sometimes the red tape becomes white ribbons that people wear because they lost a loved one because we couldn't get a solution quick enough. I can't stress enough how much it means that all three of you are here. I was born and raised in Passaic. This Boys and Girls Club is where I would come to escape all of the violence and all of the challenges that one faces when you grow up in a community like ours. A few feet away, we were able to remove train tracks in a blighted area that had crime and drugs and violence, and able to turn it into one of the best open spaces in not just our city, but our county, partnering with our county commissioners right in front of the river. Our children get to see rain gardens. They get to walk a path and enjoy nature. When I grew up here, we looked at bricks. Every now and then we got to travel, and I would see parks and nice green space and what we now label green infrastructure and all of the money available, but it wasn't tangible to me. It was something that you saw on TV or you saw as you drive by. The reason I ask is because we want to make our city better. We want to apply, we don't want to leave any dollars on the table. So if there's a way that we can know what's being prioritized, and not only us, I think sometimes community members, they don't know that officials are leaving money on the table. If there was a way that they can be told, this is the money that's available and municipalities didn't apply, hold us accountable, say your city didn't apply for this. There was money for urban communities. There were money for overburdened communities. You didn't apply. If there's a way that we can have that information made more available. And then the last, I'll conclude, and I hope I haven't taken up too much time, is this.
I don't know.
Zoom is a great resource. But in communities like ours, social media becomes so paramount to get information out, so vitally important. You can watch it later on when you're home and you come back from your second job at 11 o'clock. Maybe you're not live, but I might play it when I come back from 2 jobs. I might see it on a Saturday because it lives on. I know you made the statement, Commissioner, that this will not be the last time you're here. And the fact that you're going around the entire state from different communities, those that are more suburban, rural, those that are more urban, all communities to ensure that every issue is addressed means the world. But I would ask that you consider giving access to some of our residents, because some of the platforms there, whether you speak Spanish, whether you speak Arabic, whether you have a different language, whatever language, someone in your family is going to say it's on Facebook. I'll sit down and watch it. Sometimes it's the kids. Thank you very much.
So first of all, Mayor, thank you for, again, opening your community to us. We're the government and we're here to help doesn't always land the way you'd hope. And that's our fault, right? That's the result we deserve when government is disconnected, quite honestly. There are many ways that we can ensure you know where there are opportunities for you, as well as engaging directly with your community members and helping to give you the resources to sow that engagement further for those who may not be at a meeting or online that moment, because we do catalog all of these things that we're doing, and we can make that more omnipresent and give you the toolkit to share with others. So that is immensely doable, and we'll follow up about that, and we'll make sure that there's not a possibility you missed it because you've heard it from us. And in terms of folks not knowing where to go and who to reach out to, or not thinking they're worthy, first of all, it breaks my heart, because we work for you. We all work for the people. And one way that we can really help folks understand how to reach us is through one simple app and one simple phone number that's called Warn DEP, and we'll share that with you too.
Just want to add on that what you said, Mayor, is exactly the reason why my Office of Environmental Justice exists, is to connect directly with communities and to be a point of a liaison between communities and state government. And so I encourage anyone here today, if you're having an environmental issue, definitely utilize the Warn DEP, which is our hotline for environmental incidents, but feel free to reach out to the Office of Environmental Justice. My team in the back over there, you can get cards from them. We have some cards that have our email address and our website. We'll put all those links in the chat, but we are here to serve you and to be a resource and to connect you to the right places. And so my office may not have the answer, but other offices within the department or within US EPA Region 2 or within other state agencies within New Jersey may have the answer, may have the opportunity, may have the grant. And so it's my job to connect people to those opportunities. And lastly, I'll just say that I hope that all of you in the room will refer people in your community, your residents, your neighbors to my office. So now you hear me speaking today. Tell people about the Office of Environmental Justice, and that is a way to get connected. And so we're touring around the state, we're meeting people individually. Now we have a relationship, and so you know to contact me. I can't be everywhere, but you all can facilitate a relationship into DEP. So I hope that you take me up on that.
And this is Lisa, I would add that the EPA joins in that I think building relationships are paramount. And sometimes it is through the local elected officials. Sometimes it's through, community groups that we just need to make sure that we meet with. And so building those relationships, building that trust allows you to have the conversation about, oh, we have small environmental justice grants, $50,000 meant for that capacity building alone. And then you figure out, okay, what's the technical assistance? Being able to work with community groups on a 501c3 application so that they can actually be prepared to get a smaller grant. So these are the types of opportunities. And I would say you know, like you said, holds us accountable because it is our responsibility to not only talk to the loudest member of the crowd or the people who can fly to, for our case, fly to Washington, DC. Our responsibility is to take it to the streets, as I say, maybe because I'm from the Bronx, but but also to the rural areas, to the farms, and really get out there because we need to continue that message of we are here to help. We work for you. And sometimes it's not me showing up alone. It's through us building those relationships so that they do say, I want to talk to Candace. I want to talk to Lisa and Sean. And so we thank you for this opportunity because it is part of our responsibility to be here and to start building those relationships. Yeah.
Just wanted to share our email address, which is environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov, environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov. And our website is www.nj.gov/DEP/EJ. So we have a lot of resources and information about what's going on with environmental justice in the state on that website. So nj.gov/DEP/EJ.
Can you include that information in the link through the Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good evening. I'm Mira McCoy from Assemblyman Scher's office. I was more than willing to be a silent participant tonight, but our Trenton resident, as Director of Constituent Services, I get a lot. My environment is killing me. It's making me sick. I wanted to know, have you guys partnered with other departments like health to, you know, these issues, environmental justice can turn into social determinants of health. So I want to know if you guys are addressing that, and if you are, what is the plan?
So there's a number of ways that we coordinate with the Department of Health. At the same time, DEP and EPA are themselves public health agencies, right? We have an Office of Environmental Health, and we set standards to protect people, right? It's a bit of a misnomer. I often say that the DEP has the wrong name because I think folks can often walk away with the impression that we're meant to protect the trees. The reason that we protect the environment at all is to protect people, because people rely upon it to not flood their homes, to not bring them dirty water or bad air, right? And by protecting those things, we're actually protecting health. One way that we partner with the Department of Health on those social determinants is through planning exercises. And we recently released, and can put a link in the chat to this and also share it with those here, what we call healthy community planning reports, where you can, and this is a joint initiative between the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Health, where you can see you can pick out your town and you can get a report that explains what some of the environmental issues that impact health are. And we're then using those metrics in how we better protect communities from new sources of pollution. And that's one way to make it operable. First is to share the information, because information is power, and then you can advocate for yourself. But then how do we as government use that to do the right thing, and to do the right thing more often? Lisa, there are thoughts on the EPA side on how do you integrate that?
Yeah, it's interesting because our mission is to protect public health and the environment. But it's true that sometimes when you do studies, I remember one study, you know, do you want clean air? Yes. Do you want clean water? Of course. Do you want clean soil? Yes. Do you need an environmental protection agency? Well, I don't know. So, you know, it's part messaging, but I think one of the things, and my background comes from this, is really understanding the impact our past environmental decisions have made or caused, the results basically being health disparities, especially in communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous communities. And so for a lot of the work that we're doing, the driver is public health. And so one is the messaging. How do we talk to people? Make sure you can call, even if you don't know it's an environmental issue. How do we talk about our health, right? The high asthma rates, some causation could be pollution, contamination. And so how do we make sure that we're focusing on that at EPA? We're, same thing. We have some mapping tools. We're working with HHS, the health
Health and Human.
Health and Human Services. You're right. Acronyms to the point where you don't even know what the agency's called anymore. Health and Human Services, a federal agency, making sure that they, as their priorities, prioritize environment also, because the links to reduce, or the opportunity to reduce those health disparities. And more recently, really listening to what some environmental justice groups are saying is, we need better fence line monitoring. We need to understand the pollution that comes right off of the fence line. We need to understand what the cumulative impacts, right? Some of the classic or symbolic essence of some of the EJ areas are clusters of facilities. So you don't just have one power plant, maybe you have a chemical plant, a manufacturing plant, the bus depot, and it's all the same community. So really focusing on that cumulative impact issue. And so that's the work that we're continuing to do with the states, is understanding what the data is and trying to get to those health disparities. The way that I like to say I do environmental justice work, or the way that I think of it, is we need to reduce the burdens. And that means focusing on legacy issues and bring about the benefits. So we can talk about contaminated sites, let's clean up the legacy sites, and also talk about climate justice, how can we be proactive? And that hopefully gets to the reductions of health. So I appreciate that question, yeah.
And you feel free to reach out to us anytime to dive into it more. We're available to you. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go online if you don't mind, because Martha Arincibia, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, has been waiting for a bit with your hand up. So feel free to unmute yourself and then we'll go to you next.
Thank you so much for having this platform. I live in the city of Patterson, which has a combined sewer system. I am a homeowner and a flood victim. We have called the Warren DEP number hotline. We all get case numbers. And when we get a case number, there is no follow through. I have been championing for the combined sewer system in our city for quite some time. The fact that the language that we want to, the social injustice that we face as a community with a combined sewer system is a big burden, for the fact that the infection that people are enduring in their homes, not even knowing what is happening to them, is a big problem. It's definitely a health hazard. I can't scream that loud enough, and it gets unnoticed as this is happening in our homes, our schools, our bodegas. It goes on and on throughout the entire city. Some people get affected more than others, but nevertheless, the rain comes more frequent. It doesn't have to be a hurricane. For the area that I live in, where it's nowhere near any body of water, I just get flooded. We get flooded to the point that it's out of control. So when we call this Warren DEP, we get the case number and then there's no follow through. Number one. Number two, the biggest concern that we have as a community is the fact that the language is to make the people understand the CSO, the combined sewer overflow, is a health hazard. It's an emotional hazard, and it's a financial hardship that we cannot keep enduring as residents of a city that has a combined sewer system. Something needs to be done yesterday, not tomorrow. My area is scheduled to be addressed in 2040. That's just way beyond. In our long-term control plan in the city of Patterson, under D-43, my area, 19th Avenue Relief, is not scheduled to 2040. I've written letters to the DEP, EPA. I attend meetings. I formerly was the co-chair for the Patterson Green Team. So I'm a big advocate for this. I don't speak for myself, I speak for the entire community, because they don't understand what is happening to them. There was a video in the last storm that just occurred, a rainstorm. We flooded. There was a gentleman, he must have been in his 50s or something like that. He took out a boogie board and was swimming in that flooded, sewer, contaminated water. Why? Because no one is educating our community on the diseases that are in that water, that it's sewage backup. So this calls for a crisis. So I don't know how I could help. I'm at your, at your disposal to be an aid. I speak Spanish. We need to have a better platform for the community to be heard and to make them understand what is the problem and how can we work to get the funding to address it. That's key. My mayor, Andre Saya, is a big champion for green infrastructure and CSO, but the rest of the leadership is kind of lost in understanding. And then, of course, the money to address sewer separation and green infrastructure, you're talking millions and billions of dollars. So that is just alarming within itself. And if there's money to be had federal, why are we going to burden the community, take advantage of the federal money? Let's tap into it to relieve and start addressing the issue. I thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. And I am sorry to hear the way that this plagues your community. And there are certainly ways that we can work with your local leadership to better communicate the risks of exposure to combined sewer overflow events. For those who are not familiar with what this means, in some of our oldest cities, our stormwater systems, the pipes underground that collect and take away the rainfall, and the sanitary or sewage systems, the ones that get the water we flush, in our oldest cities, those are combined together. And what happens when there is a very high rainfall event, which we are seeing more and more of, is that these combined sewer systems cannot handle the inflow. And so they discharge their untreated sewage into waterways and into communities, bypassing the treatment systems because the system isn't big enough to handle the water it has, and all of it is mixed together. That's a crude way to explain it all, but it's functionally true. And we as a state have one of the most prolific combined sewer overflow problems in the country. And it is because we have kicked the can down the road for at least 3 decades. And now, well, we're well out of road. And we owe obligations to our partners here at EPA to fix it. It is expensive to fix the 24 combined sewer overflow communities in the state of New Jersey. Will cost us $2 billion pre-inflation. There's not enough money in the state budget or the bipartisan infrastructure law to address that on its own. And so we do have, before the DEP, long-term control plans that the caller mentioned that were put forward by the communities that have combined sewer overflows. And many of them propose to kick the can even further. But what did I say? We're out of road. So we have to invest, and we have to invest now. And so this year we'll move forward with the permitting of the next phase of the combined sewer overflows. And we're not going to give the systems that much time. We can't wait until 2040 or 2050. It was supposed to have been fixed already. And so that does create burdens to budget, to ratepayers. And we must reckon with that. But we can solve the problem, but we in the meantime must better communicate the risks. When your sewers are backing up, you don't grab a boogie board. So we will work on that with your community. I am sorry.
Hi, my name is Tyler Callum, and I live in the city of Passaic, very proudly. So I have two questions. The first question is, as climate change has gotten worse, we've seen that urban centers have been heating up faster. They have been hotter and deadlier than suburban and rural communities. And I think we all realize that we're approaching a time when what is now the hottest and deadliest will soon be the coolest and safest that we're gonna remember. What resources has the DEP set aside to insulate our communities from that? Our communities that cannot afford to invest in that infrastructure themselves? That is question number one. And number two is, within the last decade, the state went from having a majority of its power come from nuclear, which is green, to a majority coming from natural gas. And we're working to bring it back by 2050. With the cost of battery storage that it will take, can we hit those goals without expanded nuclear power?
Well, you brought all the easy questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the first question is on what I would call climate resilience. How do we build better resistance to the extreme events we're experiencing, and that honestly only get worse from here, right? Even if we made every car electric and every power generation source renewable, it's still going to get worse for a while because of the emissions we've already put into the atmosphere. The time to get climate change under control was in the 1980s, and we missed it. And so that means at least through 2050, it only gets worse. What happens after 2050 is very dependent upon what we do today. Thankfully, we've seen some really good movement in our Congress, finally. But still, it's not going to change overnight. And so we do need to be more prepared for the floods, for the heat. One way that we can build that insulation that you called it is by building more green space, by planting more trees. And we do make those resources available through our urban community and forestry, our urban and community forestry program that we are expanding with new dollars that we received from our carbon auction, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So that is one way, right? That we can help to combat the urban heat island effect that, Mayor, you welcomed me into when I stepped out of the car, right? It's not a secret that this is happening and getting worse. With respect to energy, we have lofty goals to reach 100% clean energy by 2050. They are hard to reach. We're endeavoring to get there. Nuclear energy remains our largest source of clean energy. I don't believe it's been largely displaced. We have displaced the majority of coal with natural gas. That is one way that we've brought down our emissions in the last 20 years or so. But we have much further to go.
I want to combine two questions that we're getting online, one from Brian Sandilands and the other from Emily Pointius. And so they're both making a point about Patterson, the city of Patterson, having a legacy of toxins due to dying industries in the city. And so what is the extent of, or what changes are we to expect along the Passaic River, the cleanup of the Passaic River, the Diamond Alkali site cleanup once it's fully operational? Just maybe an update, maybe from you, Lisa.
Yeah. So the Passaic River is a Superfund site led by EPA, and we're partners in that. And do you have updates that you can share, Lisa?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I just want to say that the cleanup continues along the Passaic River, and there are a few, Diamond Alkali is one site, but there's other what we call responsible parties. And so EPA is going to continue to do the cleanup. We're closely coordinating with the neighboring towns along the Passaic River. And of course, the elected officials and residents to continue that work of cleanup. And so we have, we could probably provide maybe a fact sheet for folks talking about the way that the EPA did it, working with New Jersey DEP, is we kind of divide the river up into sections. And so some of the sections are being dredged and are at a certain point, others are going through an assessment phase. And so we can talk in more detail. But what I would say right now is that EPA, working with DEP and the towns and cities along the river, are focused on cleaning up the contamination. Once that is done, and it takes, and I don't know if, the construction phase is expected to take about 8 years. And this is along the navigation channel and the 1.7 miles of the river closest to Newark Bay. Anyway, so like I said, there are different sections, and it will take many years to do this full cleanup. The one thing I want to say is once you get to a point where it is cleaned up, then the towns will probably figure out what to do with the sites along the river. Hopefully the river will continue to be used as, I think there's some ecotourism. Olivia, did you tell me this? Yeah, like along the Passaic River. So anyway, so hopefully it'll continue to be used for recreational activities as it gets cleaned up, and obviously waterfront parks and waterfront walkways. But those are the decisions that the towns will make once we deem it, okay, it's ready and now you can take over the site, or it's remediated, as we say, in the field.
And when what we can do as a follow-up to the questions that you're getting on that, we'll coordinate with EPA. We'll get the most up-to-date remedial information, what's happening when, that way we can share that broadly with the folks that have asked and with the local leadership more broadly. And I imagine there are also community advisory groups that also serve to advise EPA as well as DEP, that we can engage in that as well. But even beyond the cleanup of the lower Passaic River as a Superfund site within Patterson, we've been working from the state level with Marcia on the identification and cleanup of brownfield sites. One thing that we have in the arsenal on the state level, even when it's not a federal Superfund site, right? The worst of the worst. When it is a state brownfield site, there are resources that are available specifically to municipalities to pursue cleanups. And so we are doing that with Patterson in a number of ways, all around where the Great Falls is, for example, is one location, but there are others.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly, one of the things, I just looked it up, but the Superfund site is being cleaned up and it's divided into 4 parts. So if we could get maybe an email, the contact information, we can send you that fact sheet. And I will just say, as we're talking about the cleanup of the river, right now it is still contaminated. So do not, sometimes there's subsistence fishing. Please do not fish and eat the fish or the crabs. The site is still contaminated. So I just wanted to make sure we have that advisory also.
Yes, we will do a set of summary notes and post the link to the recording of this event on our website and send out those notes to all of the participants today and online. So stay tuned for that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diana, 22. I was born and raised in Passaic, so I'm glad to be here. I am a co-executive director of Logro, which is an aspiring nonprofit that aims to support students by giving them the holistic support that they need to build their confidence and pave their pathway to success. And one of the ways,
I love
thank
that.
you. And one of the ways that we do that is to really teach them about their environment, to learn about themselves, and to just learn about the social, political, and environmental issues that are happening in Passaic. And one of the ways to do that really easily is to make information accessible to them so that we can have discussions with them about what's happening in the city and New Jersey more broadly. So I think one of the questions I have for, I think, city officials and for the state officials is, will there be a written report of the issues, the environmental issues that are happening in Passaic? That way we can have these meaningful discussions in our schools. And will the state's response to this more public document that we're asking for, will there be a response that we can also bring back to our students to discuss this on a less abstract level and discuss more just like what's happening in our communities and ways that they can also be involved and who to reach out to more specifically?
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for what you're doing in your organization and the way that you're trying to empower your peers and young people on engagement in these issues. We want to help you in all the ways that we can. I can think of 10 things off the top of my mind that we can hand you that can serve as discussion points and ways to interact with us, and importantly, hold us accountable for what we say we'll do. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to share your contact information with Anna Maria and Nadia that are right by that desk right over there. And we can get you exactly what you asked for. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question online from Brian Sandilands again. And he is asking, can there be any provisions possibly made toward curbing or offsetting the warehouseification of the state? The increase in emissions from freight traffic and loss of parcels due to the shipping industry. Could there possibly be a public participatory cost benefit analysis of this land? These new sprawling facilities are often on rivers and tributaries and contribute to runoff and thus more severe flooding.
When Lisa and Candace and I were holding our last session in Phillipsburg, almost the entire session was about warehouse sprawl. And I think one of the most difficult things in government is when no one entity fully owns an issue. I would put warehouses in that category, right? There is local control over land use. We're a home rule state. There is no statewide plan for warehousing. There is recently, through the State Planning Commission, a set of guidance materials that the State Planning Commission has put out for the benefit of local leaders, particularly beneficial to local land use boards that make siting decisions. When it comes to warehouses of a certain size, in very particular environmentally sensitive areas, if they're proposed there, the Department of Environmental Protection might get a say. But from a broad perspective, all the litany of issues that the commenter asked about, there is not one entity that owns that. Right. And that often puts government behind the 8 ball, so to speak. But I would encourage everyone who's interested in the warehousing topic to look at that guidance material, and we can share that from the State Planning Commission with everyone here. Lisa?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely an issue that we're hearing more and more of. And from our perspective, it is definitely a local issue. And we're kind of talking about the essence of raising public awareness, people understanding how this decision is going to impact my health. And so I would encourage folks to really get engaged in these local planning decisions. And to not think that you don't have a say, to not think that you could possibly change minds. I've seen this done before, and I know it's hard, but there's a lot more information, and we can certainly share around goods movements, right? How are we moving our goods from ports to train to trucks and warehouses, and these intermodal warehouses are really part of it. Really understanding the truck traffic, the impacts to local air pollution. And so while EPA, talks about ports and maybe reducing pollution from trucks, that's only one piece of it. So it really does take folks getting engaged on the local level so that we can have these conversations to look at these decisions holistically.
Yeah, building off of that, speaking on the local level, Brian, I would encourage you to reach out to your municipal government and raise this issue with them. So on the piece that you mentioned about these facilities kind of exacerbating the stormwater runoff and the flooding that these neighborhoods are experiencing, every municipality in the state of New Jersey is required to have a stormwater ordinance that governs how stormwater should be managed within that municipality. And so green infrastructure is now a requirement for those stormwater ordinances, but your municipality has the authority to go above and beyond minimum standards that the state DEP sets. And so your town can require more green infrastructure. And so for those warehouse facilities that have a lot of impervious cover, a requirement for green infrastructure will help to mitigate some of that stormwater runoff. So encourage you to raise that with your municipal government. We'll take you, sir.
Sure. My name is Mark Scotland, and although I'm an Essex County resident, here representing more of the business side, co-founder and CEO of a company called 4.0 Analytics. And the work that we do is not just local or statewide, but it's actually national. And we focus on the transportation sector, and in particular, vehicles. So we know the transportation sector is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. And our focus is what we realize diverse solutions are required. And you said it, Commissioner, is it's going to take decades. And so we help with the transition to electric vehicles. Our focus is actually on fossil fuel internal combustion engines. And so we have a long history working with California regulators, actually the US EPA, and your office. And I'm very appreciative of New Jersey EDA and DEP for some of the ways they've been working with us. It is just tremendously important that each one of you has a very important role for what we are doing within communities and helping them apply for certain types of grant funding that are available. And we're familiar with some of the barriers when it comes to environmental justice communities because they cannot afford many electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So we provide a transition to that based on what we do with fossil fuel and current internal combustion engines. And we effectively help reduce the carbon footprint on those and help improve the efficiencies in those areas. So what I'd really like to do is, Lisa, from the Region 2 EPA side, we've worked with them before, and really important that we engage now so we can accelerate how far behind we are or were. And it's just important for everyone to understand, you well know, energy transitions, they take the longest and they're the most complex. 200 years to go from wood to coal, another 100 years to go from coal to oil before that became the dominant source of energy. They just take a long time and they cost a lot. So what we are demonstrating is there are inexpensive ways, and we just need for people to still focus on electrification, but not so much so that you're not focused on other diverse solutions that can help get us there much more quickly. So I want to be able to leave you with an envelope, and we are looking at all communities, which includes job component side to it as well, in terms of repair technicians, auto repair, curriculums. So those are some of the things that we touch on, and you all are critical to facilitating what we do.
Thank you for that. Happy to take that information. Look, when you're talking about energy and emissions reduction, it's not unlike your 401k or your any other type of investment. The diverse approach is the best approach. We're not going to solve the problem all at once tomorrow. And moving forward on multiple paths is the way that we've approached this from the state perspective, right? We're expecting, for example, on cargo equipment, for folks to at least move to clean diesel first, right? We're not going to electrify all the port equipment tomorrow. We'll get there, and we have to, right? We have to quit fossil fuels. It will happen. It must. But we can cut emissions during that transition as well. Much appreciated.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say that I have my colleagues here from EPA. Can you raise your hand, Olivia? There you go. So we can, they're the team that does the real work. So I'll just say that. But yeah, if people want to share their information with us too, that'd be great.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming to the city of Passaic. Thank you for coming to District 36. A number of quick points, if I might. Number one, thank you for taking so much of your time to tour Passaic. After that experience with our mayor, I think you'll understand why, amongst my many other positions, I'm pleased to be the president of the Hector Laura fan club. He's doing an absolutely amazing.
Sign us up.
Absolutely amazing job. And juxtaposing it with the callers that came in from Patterson, from Trenton, I think that we understand clearly that the difference is someone of the inspiration and character and vision of a Mayor Laura. And we are so blessed in the city of Passaic to have him. A second note, I'd like to give the good side of what's going on in terms of the environment. According to Rutgers University and the Department of Environmental Protection, by 2050, New Jersey will likely experience a 2.1 feet in sea level rise and 6.3 feet by 2100. And that means that I'm going to be living in beachfront property soon enough. Obviously, it is a devastation what's going on. One of the problems that we have in Passaic, which is one of the poorest municipalities in the state, I think we're number 12 or 13, and we were number 10 just 1 or 2 years ago, is how do we afford that which we need to do to offer the quality of life to our people? A second point, not related. Passaic is blessed with, according to the census, about 70,000 people. We count about 90,000 people. Many of the difference is how they responded to the census or didn't respond at all. And in fact, we know thousands of people living in Passaic who did not respond to the census because they're afraid. They don't have what? They don't have, forgive me for the term, legal status to be in this country. And their expectations because of that are significantly lower. Indeed, they're just the opposite. They're afraid to contact DEP. They're afraid to contact EPA. They're afraid to contact the mayor's office because of, they think, and unfortunately in too many cases they're right, that they're going to be receiving a visit from somebody who's going to say, you're not welcome here. So in terms of having that expectation that one would have, that situations which are bad and wrong, that people would stand up for themselves, they can't. And we've got to find a way to give them or give someone else the bully pulpit to make sure that these issues are addressed. Another point, just if you will, scattered, I don't know the lady's name, but you had spoken about getting people to talk about these issues. If you're in high school or you've got a group of friends here in Passaic, my office would love to assist you in getting people from DEP, from any state agency that you like. That's why they love us so much in our office, and we aim to keep them busy.
And we don't mind.
And you don't mind. The money is a big target. The money is a big problem. Now we are in Passaic, I believe, at a critical portion of our lives, because we've begun to get the kind of development that we've always wanted. But years ago, we had to settle for development which was less than what we wanted in order to get something started. I mentioned before, we're a poor city, you know that. How do we overcome some of these issues would be helpful in knowing that we don't know the questions, never mind understand the answers. A friend of mine was studying a foreign language a number of years ago, and we had a conversation, and I said, and how are you doing in your mastery of this other language? It happened to be Hebrew. And he looked at me and he said, it's great. I know all the right questions. I just can't understand any of the answers. And that's one of the things that I think that we need to overcome and need to understand on a local level. One of the problems is that I don't have any expectations of what your two agencies do. Now, I happen to have an understanding of what your two agencies do, because the people of the 36th district have allowed me to represent them for a number of years in Trenton. But how many of my colleagues on a local level, with the exception of my mayor and his amazing staff, including Ricky Fernandez, who is wherever you are, Ricky, we're a little bit different, but my colleagues on the city council and other city councils or town councils don't have an understanding of what it is that you do, except that every time we want to do something, you say no. Right? And we say to you, we need you to think out of the box. And you'll forgive me, you generically say no. We have no place to go. We have no knowledge of what to do. We need your help to go beyond that, and maybe to reach out, in addition to meetings like this, which are so extraordinarily important, maybe to arrange, if I may, meetings with the Passaic County elected officials. Make it something duly special in their minds, something that they can relate to and report back to, that they can have the information with which to challenge, with which to go forward. I think this meeting is amazing, and to the Boys and Girls Club, thank you very much. And to all of you and to your staffs, thank you very much. We had looked forward to this, and we're very excited that it happened. We need more. We are an amazing city. 75% of our population is Latino. Another 9 or 10% is African-American. Another 11% or so is Orthodox Jewish. We've got people from all over, of every difference that you can imagine. And we've managed over the past years to somehow garner the differences and to translate them into something amazingly positive. But we need help from Trenton. We need help from Trenton. And as a last and final note, I wanted to, through the two of you, if you'll forgive me, to thank Governor Murphy for making sure that your departments are doing what they should be doing. We never had a department before that looked at environmental justice. We never had a department before that would take the time that the two of you, and on a federal level, certainly under the president's guise, have made things a little bit better. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate the gratitude, but we're just doing our job. And I'm sorry that folks haven't done the job this way before, because they should have. So hopefully we can perpetuate that beyond our time in these roles by making an expectation of the people that call agencies like DEP home. And I understand the frustrations of those that have engaged with our agency and got a no. Oftentimes that no is because we don't understand each other enough. And unfortunately, I think the issuance of no's keeps folks from seeing all the yeses that exist and all the opportunities for partnership and funding and progress that are there. So very much interested in taking you up on that meeting with more leadership to help them understand what we do, who we are, how we can help, and what, quite frankly, we owe you. Lisa?
Yeah, I would, I do appreciate the thanks also, but it is really, well, one, our responsibility, our job, exactly. But also the essence of this is to really get, hear some of the questions and then get to the answers. Like exactly, how do we make the work that we do resonate with everybody so that they understand that there is an agency that exists that can work on this, that there are grants that exist for both community groups, indigenous groups, for states, for local entities, so the information has to keep flowing. And so our presence here is the first step. I do want to mention one thing, and Olivia Glenn is the Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor for Equity, but we actually started working with some elected officials on what all of the federal funding that's coming through to the state of New Jersey. Some of it is for like emerging contaminants, some of it is water, other is cleanup of contaminated sites. And they were federally elected officials. So we're gonna go back and say, what about our state partners and city partners to join in these informational meetings of what exactly is all the funding that's coming through? What exactly is EPA and New Jersey DEP working on together with the additional funds? So that, anyway, that information exchange has to continue, both with community members and also with the elected officials that can help us figure out how to use the money. So anyway, I appreciate the comments.
Please. Good evening. Thank you for your interest first in combating this health issue, because it's not an environmental issue, as you have conveyed, it's a health issue. You have discussed your long-term projects, and in addition to those long-term projects, I'm here to raise a question about a short-term projects. I don't know if your department will consider, or if you are already considering, working with local leaders to provide supplies to specifically low-income communities, such as filters, something so simple as filters, water filters to combat the contaminated water, or even water pitchers that have filters in it, or even water bottles that now have filters in it, because low-income families might resort to boiling water because that's their way of survival. So just as a short-term project, the long-term projects are great, but that requires years and a lot of planning. But as of right now, I don't know if you're considering working with local leaders to provide, supply that to families.
So it's a really great question. Our main job, our main everyday job, is to make sure that's never necessary, right? And the way that we do that through our water team at DEP, we monitor the conditions of every water system in the state to make sure that they are not exceeding any standards that we have set that are protective of public health. And where any standard is exceeded, that it's corrected so that there is not an exposure risk. Now, sometimes there are acute circumstances. What is happening today in the city of Newark, for example, with a water main burst? That's an acute circumstance where we make sure that the city is resolving it, is giving the right advice to their residents about boiling water on a very short-term basis, and then bringing in backup water supplies if that's necessary. To my mind, we should never let something get to the point where folks must take those measures, that we maintain our good water quality. And so that's our primary focus. In circumstances where there has been a long-term acute issue, we are not shy about deploying greater resources. You saw that unfold in the city of Newark when in 2018 and 2019 when filters had to be distributed. But What we want to make sure that folks understand is you should never have to need that. You may want to do it as an added measure, but it's our job to make sure you don't have to.
I would just add, and maybe, I'm sure we have this information, but if you know of constituents, or, family members who are concerned whether or not to boil, whether or not we're meeting the drinking water standards, I definitely reach out to us because there's a way to figure it out. As the commissioner says, if there's a point where your water is contaminated, that's where we come in and we will give you bottled water. That's a terrible, that's a place where we're trying to remediate immediately. And so hopefully we're reducing those situations. I mean, that's the goal, to protect public health, like you started out saying, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a specific situation that you want to discuss, I'm certainly happy to do that as we wrap, to make sure folks have the right information. Right? In New Jersey, we have a long history of trying to be ahead of the curve in protecting public health from new water contaminants. So we may enact a new standard, right? So for example, on a class of chemicals called PFAS, or forever chemicals, we've issued new standards in order to make sure that we're getting our water supplies cleaner from that now, as opposed to waiting for the problem to mount and mount. And that can occur. Not all states have that level of protection, but New Jersey has some of the strongest water protections in the country. We want to keep it that way.
Speaking of updating standards, I'm just going to give us one last question before we wrap up. We have Margaret Wood, a question online. So we're just talking about water standards, but to air standards, she's saying that, you regulate BPAs, you regulate PFAS, but there are probably close to 100 more chemicals that are not regulated at low levels. Can you update the EPA regulations to protect people from the extremely low levels of VOCs that disrupt the endocrine system? And for people who aren't familiar, the endocrine system is a hormonal system that regulates all bodily functions, especially fetal development. So maybe from your perspective, Lisa, but also from the state's perspective about updating standards.
Yeah, so EPA is in the business of regulating pollutants, contaminants, toxic chemicals. And unfortunately, as the person mentioned, there's thousands of pollutants that haven't gone through the assessment and the registration of, what the safe standards are for certain pollutants. So I would say EPA is, on the air side, is really trying to figure out which of the national ambient air quality standards to improve upon. So we have PM, and we know that NOx and some other pollutants, which I think lead to VOCs, are part of that kind of suite of regulations EPA is looking at. And then we also have the Office of Pollution Prevention, which is looking at kind of those, the PFAS and the emerging contaminants, and continuing to do that assessment. I think it's that unfortunate game of, like, as we regulate more toxic chemicals come out, or we manufacture more. And so it is a little bit of a catch-up game. Yeah. But we're really trying to get to the worst contaminants and the worst toxic pollution.
I think what's important to recognize, and it's often very hard to communicate, that the way that regulatory agencies like ours function is we take one chemical at a time. We figure out how bad it is for people and at what amounts. And then we look at the ways that are available to lower the release of that chemical into the environment, right, through applications of technology, for example. So I don't want to suggest that it's possible to capture every volatile organic compound, right? Because we take compound by compound in order to identify the risk and then make rules around avoiding that risk. But with air in particular, what I want everybody to understand that's listening today is that you can in real time see the conditions of your air quality in your community from our website. And if folks can put in the chat at nj.gov/DEP/airmon, AIRMON, we have 30 air monitors around the state of New Jersey that are always sampling our air quality. And you can see what those conditions are, and how there may be certain conditions in your community, and certainly at times of year like this when it's very hot, where extra precautions should be taken. And also to recognize that the majority of our air pollution is largely from vehicles, right? We often will want to look hard at the building with the smokestack, and we should, right? But the largest source of pollution, just like the largest source of flooding, it's the things that we do on our landscape every day, right? So the more that we can all take care of the environment we share, the more that we will take care of one another. So thank you all for joining us today. Candace, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you all were extending thanks to us, but it goes straight back to you for taking your time on this evening to be here with us, to share your concerns, to lift up your feedback and your input. You know, we take this very seriously, this opportunity to connect with you all, to build relationships, and to create solutions together. So thank you for this. Hopefully this won't be the last time that we are engaging with each other. And I'll give the last word to you two.
I'm going to pass it to Ms. Garcia to wrap us up. I'll just say that everything we said that we will get back to you about, we will. So Candace has a routine way that she does that at the conclusion of these. We always follow up on all of the issues that are identified and create that point of interaction back to folks. But again, the conversation doesn't end there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll just add my huge thank you, and thank you also for the tour beforehand so that we can also see and visualize a lot of what's going on. And please do share our information, because we want to make sure that we're available, and any information that we have, we can share with you. So I'll share the thanks for welcoming us. And also, I just have to say, there has been a lot of work. And so kudos to all of you, because it is amazing what you've already identified, what you're already fixing, and where you know you want to head. So I just want to say, we could take you on a roadshow to some EJ conferences already. So congratulations to you for the work. And I really hope that we can continue to help and support the work here in the city of Passaic. And thank you to the Boys and Girls Club. Like I said, I volunteer to go out and talk to students. So anyway, thank you again for hosting us and for inviting us here.
A round of applause to you all. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Good night.